Hello and welcome to the Intentional Clinician Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Krauss, licensed professional counselor. In today's episode, I'm going to be speaking with Brendan Cole, LPC. We're calling this episode, Making the Most of Your Therapy and Moving On with Life. In this podcast, we're going to dive into many different topics, including athletes and EMDR therapy, business performance at work, Olympic athletes, high achievers, and many different mental health hacks for athletes, the power of EMDR, coaching, mindset, sports experience, and more. So looking forward to the podcast. Welcome, Brendan.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to probably get you to introduce yourself first. And so can you tell everyone a little bit about you and your background?
Yeah. So where do I begin? Well, lifelong athlete. I got into the mental health field after many major changes in college, always knowing I wanted to work with people, but had to kind of navigate what that looked like more specifically. I knew I wanted to work with athletes. I knew I wanted to potentially work in the medicine realm, but or even education, but none of that really lined up until I learned more about mental health and what a structure and schedule looked like and how feasible grad school was. And everything kind of took off from there. I actually, fun fact, had my grad school completely funded for because of my experience as an athlete and was able to coach full-time while I was in grad school and left grad school debt-free, which was amazing. So that brings us up to date. I've been at Health for Life for about 5 years and have, which I feel has been a substantial amount of time to develop a niche. And I've grown to love working with athletes, clients who need EMDR, so the realm of trauma, and just anxiety as a whole.
Yeah, excellent. I know that you've tried working with lots of different people, and you've gone to many different trainings of all types. And I think people are interested in a lot of things that you've got to offer, including trauma. But I kind of want to hear about your experience and your background as in athletics, primarily from before you went to grad school to be a therapist. So I was curious about some of the topics about athletes and top performers who engage in counseling and coaching. Can you tell us something about that, kind of to start off with?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a very interesting and painful scenario that I kind of did more research on in the realm of athletes and particularly Olympic athletes. I myself, not an Olympic athlete, but I had just finished competing at the NCAA National Championship for track and field, had done very well, was very excited with my results, left a 2-time All-American, one in the pole vault and one in the long jump. And immediately after, the day after, I noticed a significant drop in my mental health. My depression went up, my anxiety went up, and TMI, but I wasn't even able to poop for like a week and a half because everything just felt shut down, and I felt bedridden for most of those like week or two after that performance. And I'm like, what is happening? I just came from one of the biggest highs of my life. I trained for months and years at that point leading up to this moment, and I just felt like my body was doing now the complete opposite, and it didn't make sense, which then turned into me looking up some facts and information about this. And it turns out there's been a ton of studies done with NCAA athletes and Olympic athletes where it shows that there's a massive increase in suicidal ideation and depression, especially as soon as the day after an Olympic performance, regardless if you got gold or silver or bronze. And what the studies show is that you ride this high for these 6 weeks to 2 months, 3 months, 6 months leading up to this big day, this once in every 4-year opportunity. And your adrenaline cannot maintain or sustain that high for that long, and what goes up must come down. And I just found that to be very interesting. I'm like, all right, how do we address that? How can I work with athletes who performing at that high level, and then just athletes in general who perform at any level. The mental game is a huge component of sports, and I love seeing athletes being able to perform at their best, feel good about it, and see how far they can go in whatever athletic journey they envision themselves accomplishing.
Yeah, wow, I did not know about this Olympic research about the increase in symptoms after the performance. And also you were talking to me about loss of identity for people that when they're done playing sports or done competing in the Olympics or college, that there's a big issue there as well. So I want to go over some of these stats in here. So it looks like currently studies show, according to Johns Hopkins, that only 10% of student athletes with a mental health condition seek help.
Yes, yeah. And I thought that was surprising. And even with that study being done in 2022, I think just in general, therapy has been trending and it's become more popular. So I'm surprised to see that number is so low. And my theory is that as these athletes who get stuck in their head or are quick to maybe even correlate it to their sports alone are unaware of external factors that are also contributing to what they're experiencing.
Yeah, and there can be a lot of pressure if your entire scholarship money depends on competing in a sport or something like that. You're trying to make it in a sport or compete for your college or the Olympics at your country. And up until recently, there hasn't been much financial reward outside of tuition. I know that's sort of changing now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But there was more stats that you had in here that 38% of female student athletes and 22% of male student athletes report feeling mentally exhausted constantly or almost every day. That was NCAA, National Collegiate Athletic Association. That was a 2020 study. I don't know if the pandemic had something to do with that or not.
Yeah, I was curious on that as well, because before the pandemic and after, I mean, you're going to see the common impacts on athletic performance in general can include like academic experience, their own playing time, identity, relationship with coaches and teammates, which have continued to, persist, today. And there's another part of that I was trying to talk specifically about the pandemic. Here it is. And this was research done in 2020 as well, where the NCAA reports that mental exhaustion, anxiety, and depression amongst college student athletes have remained 2 times higher than pre-pandemic rates. So, I can see that definitely being a correlation to the events of the pandemic.
Yeah, and then he's discussed here, it is reported that depression risk ranges from 12 to 35% for student athletes in football, baseball, wrestling, track and field, and lacrosse. And that's from the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health 2023. So basically, it's interesting. I think culturally, people see athletes as these like high achievers, in the spotlight, just, everyone's cheering them on.
Having fun.
Right. And I mean, they might like be representing their school, representing the country or something. And, but for a lot of student athletes, they aren't going pro. And I wonder, and all the hours of work and practice, you devote yourself to this. And I don't know, because I was not in organized athletics in college, but I remember meeting some people that were, and they seemed to kind of be in their own little world. Like they had like their own dorms that they mostly stayed in, their own cafeteria. They had gym, required workouts all the time. They were always traveling. They had like tutors that went with them on the traveling. And it just seemed like a lot of pressure to even do their academics while they're on this team. And I wonder, this is just speculation, that could, for certain people who are maybe not pro-bound, maybe this isn't their career, that can be a big, I don't know, the stress of that could lead to different mental health symptoms. Because as we know, stress really exasperates any sort of symptoms you may have or genetic preconditions. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. The loss of identity is a theme that will change at all the different levels, right? There's, you have athletes who, compete and play their whole life, but then, they round out their athletic career in high school, right? There's others that round out their athletic career in college. And then there's even some at the professional level. I'm sure all of you, or most of you at least, heard a lot from Michael Phelps on his journey, his athletic journey, and just what he suffered after was a massive identity loss, especially after his second DUI, and you just realized that something was going on. And that's when you open up to the world about mental health and everything. So I love talking about the identity side of sports. Right, it could become such a defining character trait of who people are. And what happens when they don't have that anymore? What happens when they leave high school or they leave college? They don't have that consistent community with them all the time, or routine all the time, things like that. A big part of what identified them all those years, maybe even since childhood, just seems to vanish and go nowhere. And they're like, okay, now what? Who am I? So I find myself working and addressing a lot of the mental health symptoms that come up as a result of that. Mostly anxiety, some depression, but mostly just this like restless uncertainty of like, who am I? What do I have to offer? And then, that can then just, pour into, no pun intended, drinking and isolation and other poor forms of coping skills to find meaning or kind of fill that void.
Right. And that's interesting because we often talk about the post-college blues when people move out of campus or move away from campus, people that went to college anyway, and they move off campus and there's like this built-in community is lost, right? And you have to really work on defining your friendships. You can't just rely on people in your dorm or in your apartment complex necessarily to be your friends, and you have to really work hard on that. So if you've been a student athlete, which is like a step up from that because you have a built-in community that is like your community in the school, and then all of a sudden you're just no longer playing sports, it can be a massive drop-off, as you may not have had to work so hard on developing interests outside of sports because you didn't really have any time. So that tracks. So let's talk about the positive is this. I know that one of your specialties is working with athletes and high performers using EMDR therapy and of course, talk therapy as well, and a lot of motivational interviewing. So there's two sides to that. There's one where we're talking about kind of like the depression and the identity, and maybe you've been an athlete or a high performer, or you identify with somebody who just really loves, something you're really into. That is a performance-based thing, maybe even musicians or something like that. You're working with people post their career. You're working with people in their career. So the one side of it is maybe that we've been kind of focusing on people that have stopped being an athlete. So I kind of want to go there first and then talk about how to improve performance second. So could you talk to me about how you use EMDR and talk therapy to help people that have kind of exited, per se, the sports world post high school or college?
Yeah, for sure. So, with EMDR, in a brief explanation, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And with utilizing EMDR, what is most commonly work to understand first with clients is the negative internal narrative that they kind of find themselves rehearsing, whether it's subconscious or they are more aware of it on a oftentimes daily basis. And so when I work with these athletes who have kind of this loss of identity, it takes some time usually to kind of find what that negative belief is about themselves. It's usually, I nothing to offer, I suck, I'm the worst, right? But it's not it's rarely rooted to one thing and more of just this overall representation of their life. And so we work to first, address this identity they had in sports, and correlate and try to understand, okay, what are the components that are missing from that presently? What is realistic about what is missing and what is unrealistic? And from there, we're usually to bring up more specific events, that were either anxious-inducing or, particularly troublesome, and work to address them via EMDR. With athletes who are no longer in that college or even high school competitive atmosphere, we'll also work towards reprocess. This is the reprocessing component of EMDR. We're implementing a template of success. Where can we take the components of their athletic career and apply it, in the current or even future settings, right? Getting involved in a team, getting involved in a community, right? It's okay that, you're maybe not at the highest level, and that's more on what we would kind of be addressing with EMDR. But yeah, I think I have more to go on there, but.
Sure. So what I'm hearing more or less is you're sort of targeting these areas that may need addressing post a sports career or a sports participation because they're in a different phase of life. And now I think for the listeners out there who are unfamiliar with EMDR therapy, it's not just talk therapy, because a lot of people say, well, I know, I read all the time. I watch Instagram and TikTok reels of coaches, and they're always giving us great tips. There's all these books I've read. And I think that people out there sometimes mistake knowledge for the felt experience of something. And I think that is, they say wisdom is knowledge in action, right? And so one of the hardest things is this, like I can go watch a YouTube video right now about how to lift weights in a certain way. Executing it is a whole different scenario, and getting motivated to do it is a whole different scenario. And so if you're out there and you're like, well, I kind of get what Brendan's saying, but how is EMDR going to help me? I would say as an EMDR therapist also that look at the research. EMDR is phenomenally successful with post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's one of the most difficult disorders to treat of all mental health symptoms that are not like schizophrenia or something like that. So your average person gets PTSD often. Then it can, of course, work on anxiety, depression, different things like that, because it is a process and it's an experience that you go through in therapy, that your defenses somewhat are taken down in the therapy, and you go through an experience of different visualizations, bringing up different memories, bringing up different feelings, and your brain with the EMDR processing makes sense of it. I'm being vague because I'm not going to explain the entire process of EMDR. If you want to do that, I have 3 or 4 other podcasts on EMDR, and there's websites on it that explain the actual process. But the interesting thing is it's not just like they're coming in for like tips from Brendan. It's like he's actually leading you through something that by the end of the whole point is to get you out of therapy, which is why I like that the subtitle of this podcast was making the most of your therapy, moving on with life. The whole point is to get out of therapy, right? And so, but you can't just like dip in there and like get a few tips and leave in 4 sessions. Like there's an actual experience that you're bringing people through with EMDR. It's like, it's why you probably can't live off samples from Costco. You might actually have to buy groceries and cook, right? You can't just go in there and expect results. It's the same thing as an athlete. If you don't lift weights and practice and stretch and all of those things, you're going to see that come out in your performance. So it's the same thing in therapy. We're bringing you through a process. The difference is this: a lot of people get scared because they don't know what that process looks like. What I would say is this: the process is different with everybody. The techniques are similar that we use, but the way we use it on you is customized to you and your culture and your psyche. So I wanted to point that out because you were doing a good job explaining what you did, but I feel like sometimes people go, well, how does it work? Well, that's a whole long discussion, and there's books full of material on that. Let's talk about, let's just say you get an athlete or somebody who's a business person or trying to make their way in the world, and they just want to perform higher. How do you use talk therapy and EMDR therapy specifically to kind of help athletes or people that are business or people just trying to achieve in their lives? How do you help them become more effective?
Yeah, so the most common symptom that these clients are experiencing, whether they're high achieving, business executives or high achieving athletes or athletes in general, is anxiety. And usually when we start this conversation, I like to first reframe anxiety to these clients as a good thing. Ultimately, anxiety is keeping us alive at its baseline level at its function. If your fight or flight response is a life-saver when you're being chased by a bear, for example, right? But if you're like walking out to the mailbox and to get the mail and you're having a panic attack, right? It's the right emotion, wrong time. And so explaining this to clients that, hey, again, anxiety is keeping you safe. It's serving a purpose, but right now it's hindering you more in your performance than it is helping. We need to explore why your body is justifying a response to whatever stimuli it is, and EMDR goes about helping resolving it. So the talk therapy, a lot of that is education of what's happening, increasing their body awareness, and laying out the science behind it, how it all works, what anxiety is, right? And then EMDR is where we can really go into the physical nature of it with the memories, with the thoughts and everything. It's kind of getting their mind out of the body's way. And athletes tend to be really good at EMDR because they're already so physical. They can already be in tune with how their bodies work. And so I think this is another added layer as to why athletes have found a lot of success in adding EMDR. So, because from there, they're able to, perform at their best. And when people ask, what does that mean, performing at your best? Well, practice is laid out for you to be thinking and training, right? You're working on your technique across the board and reps and everything like that. You're practicing and you're thinking. It's repetition oriented, right? And the goal of practice is for you to not think when you're performing. When you're performing and you're competing, you want your body to take over. And when athletes come in for therapy, their mind is still kind of running the show. They're in their head. They're all these intrusive thoughts, the imposter syndrome, things like that. And those are not helpful. So what EMDR helps is remove those barriers that allow athletes to, compete at at that level. I currently train as a wrestler and track and field athlete. I currently train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I was having this conversation with a teammate, and he was a little nervous going out onto the mat. Literally, we're fighting other dudes who are trying to, break limbs or, choke you out or something like that. So granted, yeah, he was going to be a little nervous. His wife and kids are watching. He's like, man, I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to embarrass them. And all these added layers that he wasn't experiencing, in the training room. And so how do we distinguish between the two? Yeah, the competition is going to be a more of an intense atmosphere, which is normal, which is fine. But when I was talking to him, what I realized is as much as you want to go out there on the mat and leave it all out there, don't give up, put your full effort into it. You want to kind of also make sure you're not bringing more onto the mat with you than is needed. Everything you've been doing in the training room has prepared you for this moment. You're able to relax. You're able to, flow, move, and, engage in a community that's lifting you up. And it's the same thing, just at with maybe a little bit more of a spotlight.
Yeah, and I think we have to normalize performance anxiety, because you could have performance anxiety at the skateboard park or the ball park or the pickleball court or whatever, just playing with nobody watching at all, let alone you go and you even play in like amateur sports or like jiu-jitsu, like you're saying, there's like a tournament or something and there's people watching, there's fans, friends, it's like your friends watching, right? And there's a level there that I think is way different than the personal practice, because most people don't watch practice. No one's, except for your coaches or whatever. And I love that you said anxiety is normal. I've treated athletes that will remain nameless and descriptionless, of course. But one time, I'm changing the sport real quick. So in my brain, okay, sport changed. They kept dropping a ball, essentially, when they were trying to catch it in football. And they had been a very high achieving ball catcher, let's put it that way, in their career up until that point. And lo and behold, they did not identify it as anxiety. They just were frustrated, and they didn't even want to say it was anxiety, because that was like the whole idea of saying that word made them feel like weak. And so it took a long time for me to be able to kind of figure out what else was going on. And I figured out this person had some major family stress go on in their life. And then lo and behold, right around the time of the family stress is when they started dropping balls, right? And that was a huge problem because now you're under pressure for your team and your manager and your coaches. If you don't, if you're a semi-pro or college athlete and you start dropping balls, what happens next? They put you on the bench, which then decreases your confidence even more. And so with EMDR, one of the ideas was tracing the moment of what happens when you're trying to catch a ball. And like you said intrusive thoughts and distractions, you said. And this person finally identified that they were having intrusive thoughts and distractions, but they didn't want to admit it. It was like they were so good at sports their whole life that the very fact that they were like now feeling, quote, weak, this is their language, not mine, that it was insulting to them, and they argued with their coaches until their coaches sent them to therapy. And again, the sport has been changed, and so is the name of whoever it is. And it took a while, but targeting that, not only do we target what was intruding on their thoughts while playing, we also then worked on the target of their frustration if they did drop a ball, because you're not going to catch every ball. There's no way in the world anyone can ever catch every ball. So that we minimize the emotional reaction through the subjective unit's distress of EMDR by desensitization and exposure to that disappointment. So that, because if you get disappointed, that could throw off your whole game. Good example for our Michigan friends is the Detroit Lions in the 2023 NFC Championship with the San Francisco 49ers. One of the worst games I've ever witnessed in my entire life. They got I think they got a little nervous because the 49ers did a really good play, and this guy caught a ball which no one thought he would get to, and it threw them off their scoring streak. And the next thing you know, them and the coach, I think, got riled up and made a series of bad choices. And they did not call a timeout to calm down. And then the 49ers scored like 4 touchdowns, and then they won the game. And if you don't know that game, just Google the highlights and you will be astounded at the fact that the Lions were up by 4 touchdowns and then ended up losing by 2 touchdowns or something like that. So
ridiculous.
Mindset is a huge issue with sports, especially in that high pressure situation. If you win, you go to the Super Bowl. If you lose, you go home. Not only is it about the game, it's about money when it comes to pro athletes. So there's even more pressure, right? And where am I going to live? If I got my kids in the school district, but if we lose this game, I might be traded to Tampa Bay or something. I don't want to live there, right? So it's like there's so many things that can intrude on your thoughts, right? And we saw this with Tiger Woods. Say what you will about him, but he's had a lot of ups and downs emotionally in his life. And when he was in trouble and getting in trouble for a lot of things back in the day, his golf score went horrible. And then when he got his mindset right and got treatment, all of a sudden his golf score was great. So I think it's about being honest, and the stats from the NCAA were troubling that people weren't seeking help in that way. So tell me more about treating the athletes to optimize their performance from your angle or business people.
Yeah. Kind of like what Paul was saying earlier. EMDR has this standard process, but it'll be different for each individual client. So we go more into the specifics of these obstacles, whatever the mental game, which is what it typically is, what it looks like for each individual person, what it means to resolve it. Was there a particular athletic event that, kind of still sticks with them? Is their worth determined in their performance, win or lose, right? Is there a fear of disappointing, failing, getting kicked off, things like that are valid, but are usually irrational, right? But it comes from somewhere. It comes from somewhere that their body learned that it must never happen again. And so what their body's doing is, protecting, keeping them safe, thus, the anxiety. So with EMDR, we'll continue to desensitize the client's reaction to this. With the bilateral stimulation that, EMDR adds as part of the process, we'll continue to desensitize the client's reaction to a memory with the negative thought until that, maybe 9 or 10 out of 10 goes down to a 1 or a 2, ideally a 1, ideally a 0. And when I say desensitize, we're having the clients really sit in those specific events or memories that were either recent in the last couple of weeks or connect to a larger, bigger event that could have been years ago. Could have even been when they're a child and they didn't even realize it. And who knows? It could even be connected to, maybe like a family member left or died or something happened in school that wasn't even related to sports, right? But the body found a way to connect all of it. And what I love about EMDR is that it could almost feel or seem random, but it's not random. And clients will often be like, I don't know why I'm thinking about this, and I don't know why I'm crying about it either. But with the desensitization, we're finding a release. We're releasing these holds that your body has over you, and is ultimately then contributing to the negative thoughts or beliefs and the negative mindset or the fears that a client or athlete is experiencing in that moment.
That's a good point. I like that you said people are often surprised at what comes up. That's because we have a process, but it's different for everybody, but it does this exploration piece that's hard to explain because it's not just you sitting there and thinking, going, let me think really hard about this. It's the opposite. We use this technique that gets you not to think, which then shows your nervous system, shows you what it traces back to what event or what issue or what situation is actually possibly causing you to slip up and not perform to your highest. So yeah, let's I feel like we're hitting EMDR pretty well. I want to make sure we talk about like some of the evidence that the article on our website about EMDR therapy for athletes. Is there anything you want to touch on with that?
Yeah, so there's some studies. I love what research has to say about EMDR for athletes. For example, a study conducted by a researcher at the University of the Rockies explored the role of EMDR therapy in enhancing athletic performance, particularly in internationally competitive cyclists. The findings demonstrated notable improvements in performance, outcomes, anxiety reduction, self-esteem, and motivation. The self-esteem especially has been one that I really enjoyed looking at. Just seeing, you can look at athletes and almost see a tangible weight lifted off their chest, their back, and it's not usually talked about as much. But similarly, the integration of positive psychology techniques into the EMDR peak performance protocol showed promising results in reducing performance anxiety, enhancing skillful performance in various high-functioning individuals, including pilots and athletes. But yeah, more recent studies also prove the positive impact of EMDR on athletes' performance. For example, another 2023 research involving 2 female golfers found that EMDR significantly reduced their competitive state anxiety, and we can talk about kind of a difference between that later, and address their performance blocks, their kind of the mental barriers that were in their way. This one especially, we haven't talked much about injury, and maybe we can get there, but another study with athletes who had experienced traumatic injuries revealed that even a single session of EMDR therapy could lead to reduced anxiety and improved self-confidence. So I want to kind of go back to the competitive state anxiety in ways for athletes to compartmentalize. So typically, this anxiety is going to be so overwhelming that it's going to include, all factors. It's going to include all the negative thoughts, and then also the immediate, fear or the intensity of the moment, right? And again, I want to reframe that anxiety and nerves are good, and honestly, the anxiety and nerves can help athletes perform better with the adrenaline, with the atmosphere, things like that. And so when I help athletes kind of get back out there into the competitive realm, right? We want to have a positive relationship with our anxiety, which often can include calming yourself, positive affirmations, things like that. Hey, I'm out here. Hey, I'm here to have a good time. Why am I doing this? Oh, because I love the sport. I'm going to be safe. I'm going to be secure. And it's okay that I'm a little nervous because this is a big tournament. This is an important match, whatever. Which is very different than competitive state anxiety, which is usually including everything all at once and will often lead to athletes just shutting down and dissociating and such.
Excellent. Yeah, it sounds like, there's a lot of things that go into sports and competition and athletics because you're utilizing your body, and EMDR is a good mind-body therapy, as they call it. So it sounds like you're even getting into some of the nuances of how people experience performance anxiety versus competition anxiety versus identity with, their competition and sport. So tell us about, let's talk about you a little bit, about how you got into all this. I know, your sports experience, you've mentioned wrestling and track and field, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Can you talk a little bit about just, what you've done with sports, and then also I know you've coached. So let's go with sports first.
Yeah, absolutely. I've described this recently, and I thought it was kind of funny, where I unintentionally like Mr. Miyagi'd myself over the course of my life. And this isn't to say I'm this, all-time great athlete or anything, but I've realized in, recent years that I've really enjoyed just research with the nervous system as a whole. And I'm like, okay, why am I interested in this? Why do I like it so much? And why do I have a good relationship with the nervous system? I realized that I've exposed myself and my body to extreme sports, to extreme levels of from exhaustion to pain, just cardiovascular, all across the board. I've run 3 marathons. Again, I was a high school and collegiate athlete with a lifetime of wrestling, and now Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which, if you know anything about those two sports, they're highly taxing on the nervous system, not to mention the rest of your body. And similar to, to ice baths that are trending right now and saunas that are trending right now, what people realize that as much as they are good for you, they're really challenging the nervous system. If you ever get in an ice bath for the first time, I want you to pay attention to the thoughts that come into your head right away. You'll see a raw version of yourself. You'll see a panicked version of yourself. And I'll be very curious to hear from any of you that are interested, what are the immediate thoughts, The most common one is that I'm going to die, something's wrong, which I think is really funny, but it's true, right? The power of the ice bath is, you're essentially convincing your body that you're not being chased by a bear. And then there's all these studies on the benefits of it that you can, look up on your own time. I just want to reiterate, the ice baths are not the end all be all. You want to make sure you're taking care of yourself outside of everything, but it can be a great addition if you're an athlete. But with wrestling, with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I have found that with any trauma-informed lens, that because it is such a full-body exercise that very much challenges your nervous system, that a lot of my friends that I train with, including myself and even my wife is a perfect example, found themselves experiencing either old wounds, old fears, their adrenaline or fight or flight was through the roof. My wife had to leave the room a couple times just because of her anxiety, which she would say she had a good rein on for a while, came out of nowhere. What was it? For her, the sport was dominated by a lot of men, right? In jiu-jitsu, you're put in physically compromised positions, right? And what these individuals, including myself, my teammates, find themselves stuck when someone's out literally putting their full weight into you, driving into the mat and making you feel pain at some points, is these thoughts that people are experiencing are like, I am unsafe, and I am a piece of shit. Something's wrong with me, and those are just not true, right? The reality is that these are your teammates, they're taking care of you, and you just need to get out. Or not get put in that position again. And so how do we change or shape that into a trauma-informed lens? Well, you kind of begin by exploring what it feels like to make new shapes with the body. And that's more of a abstract concept, not really a physical concept. But this is why also yoga and dance have proven to be very beneficial therapeutic exercises that people can be involved in consistently and feel and experience a lot of freedom from. So as much as I am very competitive and I strive to be a top tier performer and athlete all across the board. I really love the benefits that you almost are gaining passively on the side from something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, something like, wrestling or, yoga or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting and challenging mentally. And I know that we talk a lot about, challenging yourself mentally and physically in safe ways is a good way to grow and build resilience. Talk to me about coaching and your experience with that and helping people transition maybe from sports to, business or an artistic pursuit.
Yeah, coaching was something I didn't expect to see myself enjoying as much as I do now presently. And then when I also was coaching more routinely in grad school and a little bit post-grad school, coaching, I felt like I found myself developing like niche parenting skills because I'm now not necessarily responsible, but more aware and in charge of a large team or family, in that regard, where there's going to be a variety of emotions. Some gals can be doing well, performing well, and other athletes on the team can perform poorly, and how to manage that excitement, or having a team that is doing well all season and then throws the game when it matters most. And I've enjoyed that a lot. It's helped me even reframe some of my therapeutic approach as well. I say this often, and this is one of the things I learned from coaching. And there's a space to be angry, and it's okay to be angry, and it's okay to be upset, right? You kind of hear about, well, my grandpa just told me to, rub dirt in it and walk it off. And, there was no emotional connection there. It was like invalidating and dismissive. And, while that may be true, there is a place for that, And so when my athletes come up, they're clearly upset, I would give them 10 minutes. Hey, you get 10 minutes, you get to go be upset. You get to go be angry. You get to go, express those emotions. Those are real emotions that are important. But after 10 minutes, we have to regroup, and we have to get ready for the next event. We have to get ready for the next match, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about what happened, because there needs to be that emotional connection. We need to reframe. We need to get ready for that next bit. And honestly, and this is another stat too. I believe the number I have to look it up. It's missing me now, but I think it's like 0.5% or maybe even less of athletes that make it to the top have like never lost, like who go undefeated. The rest have usually lost about half or even more than half of their matches or events to get where they're at today. Which means losing is necessary to see the holes or gaps in your game or what you need to improve on. If you're winning all the time, you're not really seeing what you need to improve on. And so being able to reframe this with athletes as a coach has been wonderful and beautiful in its own way, and translates to a lot of other areas of life, business executives included.
Yeah, exactly. Business workers, people that are doing artistic endeavors, construction, whatever, or just in having an interpersonal relationship. If you can't look at where things are going wrong, or you're unwilling to take feedback on something you could improve on, you're not most likely going to do as well. I would say anecdotally, there are exceptions to that, but essentially you may not also make many friends if you don't know how to take feedback and work on some of the shadow parts that you may not fully understand. It's this, we think we know how we show up, but until somebody gives us feedback, we don't always know how we show up. Well, in sports, you might think you're showing up a certain way, but if everyone's watching you, they can see how you actually show up. It's a lot more in the spotlight, right? Mm-hmm. So talk to me about just some of the things you're doing now in your therapy practices. You've been a therapist for 5+ years, and utilizing mindfulness and EMDR and different things like that. What are you looking to do?
Yeah, so majority of my clients that come in now are looking for EMDR, which I love and enjoy. I think I still, with EMDR, I continue to see the biggest signs of improvement across the board. I can watch clients slowly just, again, lift that weight off their shoulders over the weeks and months and sometimes even years that it takes to work through some of these things. So predominantly EMDR, but I And then after that, work with a lot of, like I said, this whole time, athletes and then high achieving business executives. Another niche I've been working with too, primarily men in this case, is pornography addictions. That has become more of a recent niche in the last couple of years because it's still a problem, still an issue, and it's continued to come to my attention as I work with individuals because I see it impact marriages, jobs, and even just daily functioning skills and such. So I've really enjoyed taking the time to work with that niche because it also resembles a lot of the lifestyle hacks that I'll utilize when I'm working with other athletes and other individuals who come in for various symptoms and diagnoses.
Excellent. And yeah, it sounds like you've got a lot of interest in a lot of areas, and I know that you've also worked on people that have experienced trauma and adverse experiences, but it seems like some of your main niches where people seek you out are people that were former athletes, current athletes, people that are trying to become high achievers, trying to perfect, even though I shouldn't use that word perfect, but trying to improve their craft in some sort of area, whether it be business or school or home, right? I know that one of the things I think you can also compare this to is when high school and college students are taking large exams, right? Or somebody's taking an exam for licensure or architecture or something like that. That's also a performance measured thing. And I think EMDR and talk therapy can do a lot for that as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing I was going to note or add as well, if you're looking for anything immediate, like mental health hack-wise for athletes specifically, I like to have them, you kind of practice ways for envisioning success or planning on things going well, which takes, again, I'm going to use the word, visualizing success, visualizing yourself, getting your arm raised, crossing the finish line first, catching the ball, things like that. But then also journaling your desired results. And we're talking like, I'm going to be, an NCAA champ. I'm going to be, 2024, All-American or most received yards or, I'm going to show up every day for practice, right? There's no, comparison to what these goals are, but I'm talking write them out on your journal like 50 times, like right in a row, 50 times. And that's daily. It's rigorous. It takes work. But there is a, manifestation that can happen, and it's something that can be so ingrained in your being that, and less so determine who you are simultaneously.
So really working on some mindset of telling yourself what you want to do over and over and over, and in a way, especially writing it down, not typing it, but writing it. We know that writing is more powerful than typing when it comes to self-referential things. Then your focus starts to be on what ways you can then, work on that, whether it be more practice. And I think today's society is very distracted by phones and computers and television and whatever. So if you're trying to become an athlete or a high performer of any type, you've got to find a way to get away from that stuff and make space for yourself to practice. Is there anything else you want to share for the audience?
Yeah, so I think we covered it all. Again, I want to, my name's Brendan. You can find me on our Health for Life website. I'm available for both online and in-person sessions. If this is something that is interesting to you or relates to you in any way, I'm here to kind of work alongside you in this process. We're going to do it together and figure this out. I really enjoy it, and I want to see people succeed.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Brendan, for coming on the show. And you can look him up, Brendan Cole, LPC, Grand Rapids, Michigan area. And his bio will be in the show notes. And he does a lot of different specialties. You can check him out. Thanks so much for giving us all of this information.
Oh, thank you, Paul.
And there you have it. This has been another episode of the Intentional Clinician Podcast. If you are enjoying the show, please leave us a rating on iTunes or share the show with people you know. I would surely appreciate it. As some of you know, I am passionate about preventing future violence in the United States. I have started a nonprofit with colleagues called the National Violence Prevention Hotline, which is a 501c3 organization. We are endeavoring to gain funding and collaborators and volunteers so that we can start a 24/7 hotline and chat line to reach potential perpetrators before they may act violently. It is a bold effort to curb violence and save innocent lives by working to connect with potential offenders while they are in the planning stages of violence, help to de-escalate them, and provide resources so that they can get appropriate professional help. The National Violence Prevention Hotline is looking to open up a conversation about violence in society, the causes, and the solutions. You can learn more by visiting our website at violencepreventionhotline.org. You can get involved by writing your congressperson from our website, sharing it with your network, or even donating to the cause. If you are looking for an EMDR International Association consultant, I am a consultant and I can help provide 20 hours that you need to become EMDRIA certified. Just check out the show notes and send me a message and see if we're a good fit to work together. If you are in need of counseling, do not hesitate to make an appointment with a local counselor in your area. You can also make an appointment with the excellent clinicians at Health for Life Counseling in Grand Rapids as part of the Trauma Informed Counseling Center of Grand Rapids by visiting www.healthforlifegr.com. And if you are in the state of Michigan, you can also schedule a telehealth appointment. The recording you just listened to consists of the personal opinions of Paul Krauss and his guest, and while these are based upon the literature they have read and the experience in their respective fields, the information on this podcast should not be viewed or thought of as the definitive opinion on any subject. Listening to this podcast is not a substitute for treatment. If you're in a crisis, please call 911 or the National Crisis Line at 988. Support your local bookstore by shopping at bookshop.org. That's www.bookshop.org. It donates a percentage of sales to local bookstores all across the United States, which I think gives character to our cities and a place to hang out and a place to explore. You can order from the comfort of your own home online while supporting businesses near you. If you are a therapist and you are not involved in your local counseling or therapist or social work organization, please get involved to at least pay dues so that we can have lobbyists help keep mental health care accessible at the government level, and also expanding into schools and other places that need it. And also, if you didn't know, counseling organizations and professional organizations are working to keep us from becoming gig workers for a lot of large corporations who are coming in and trying to buy up local counseling agencies or basically pay you what they pay for people to deliver food to your house. So, get involved. Until next time on The Intentional Clinician, I wish you all a safe and peaceful week.